You're listening to Two Beers Until Phronesis, a philosophy podcast for students, graduates, and anyone else interested in ideas. Alongside regular guests and friends, we discuss some of life's big questions over a few beers. Enjoy. Okay, yeah, so we're still in lockdown, coronavirus. How are you guys holding up with everything? You guys doing all right?
I suppose. Very bored.
Has it actually affected your lives in any way?
Well, I'm working from home, stuck in the same four walls. It's pretty bad. Although, like, going out in terms of like going to the shops and stuff, that's pretty much hasn't changed. But my day-to-day routine's pretty sedentary otherwise.
You say it's like overall it's a negative experience.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of fun because you can stay home and you don't have an excuse to go and do anything. So you can just watch TV and play games. That gets boring pretty quick.
I'm living with my parents, so I'd do anything to go out at the moment before I actually get arrested for murder.
Oh,
yeah.
My experience is relatively positive. That may sound kind of, I don't know, that might not sit right with some people. And I understand why, but I like to think at the very least I'm making the best of the situation. It's obviously not ideal.
I've got a question for you.
Go on.
Are you being productive?
Yes, this is something I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
So I've been podcasting, working on the garden, doing gardening. Obviously, like talking with family and friends, housework, learning a couple of new bits and pieces, but also relaxing. And I think there's a difference between not doing anything and not working. I think there's a fine line between those kind of things. Speaking to somebody the other day, and he was saying how we essentially live in a culture where we kind of exchange these prescriptive, moralistic statements about like how busy we're all being, like shaming people who aren't busy enough.
People are baking. I'm seeing like so many loaves of bread online, and like people have started knitting, learning new languages.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I can't be arsed.
Baking's a weird one because especially like making bread.
Yeah.
People often say that's like, oh, it's like I'm doing such an earthy thing. I'm going back to the roots of humanity.
Legit.
But it's the most middle class thing you can fucking do.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
But there's like very little value. It might be quite therapeutic, but
it's pointless. It's pointless.
You can buy bread for literally like 1p and it tastes fucking great. You don't need to like spend hours making it yourself.
It's like making your own crisps.
Right.
Just buy crisps.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get it. And like the smell's nice and everything, but it's a novelty. It is definitely a novelty.
I saw a tweet that was middle class lockdown bingo, and it's banana bread, growing tomatoes,
yes,
drinks on Zoom, videoing your street clapping, doing Joe Wicks PE, ordering from independent shops. I've seen a lot of ordering from independent shops, and people are like, "Oh, support your local."
I think that's a good thing.
Crafts,
meditation
and tea, and I've seen all of that.
Yeah, bit of yoga going on here. Yeah, obviously I'm drinking a couple of nights of the week and going on Discord. So I guess I'm doing quite a bit of that. Bit of baking, yeah. But yeah, I don't know. This whole thing about like this idea that spending time with family and friends and resting is like unproductive, which I don't think it necessarily is unproductive. I think that's the wrong word, but it's certainly not immoral. It's just this weird moral language surrounding the whole idea of resting, as if resting is like an evil thing to do.
You wasted space. Day.
Really strange, and it's like a massive cultural difference between different cultures. I guess there are places in the world that value rest a lot more than we do. I think there are Eastern countries that don't. I guess somewhere in like China, where it's arguably more commercial in the city centres at least. Obviously, there's this massive like dichotomy between paddy rice fields and shit and actually
and shit.
Yeah, like it's literally medieval out there. You know, they can rest. But in the city centres, I think that there is probably more of a push towards productivity than we have. But I think we're still in this weird mindset, especially when it comes to things like celebrities and stuff. The other thing my mate was saying, how celebrities are always seem to be busy. And I think that's true. But yeah, I don't see the problem with like enjoying the moment and living in the present, even if it just consists of having a cup of tea or just disappearing into the escapism of like video games and cinema in between certain tasks. It's just not helpful to think of it as wasted time, particularly if the overall quality of things you are producing are still good. I don't know. The last thing you want is to feel bad for relaxing or spending time with friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah, largely agree. I think I'm not going to try and bungle the quote because I can't remember it. I think it was a Beatle that said something about time spent doing what you love is not time wasted.
Yeah.
Could have been John Lennon.
Sounds like John.
But yeah, I largely agree with that. I think you just got to live for yourself a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I remember, I think this has been the third time I've mentioned this actually. You both might remember this actually. That old like automated economy thought experiment I was going on about. Do you remember this?
You might have to remind me.
Yeah, carry on.
I was talking about, wouldn't it be not the end of the world if we no longer had to work in the classic sense of the term? Wouldn't it be great if our economy was so automated in the far, far future that our lives largely consisted of more social activities and things? I remember...
Would that be great? Have you seen WALL-E? They're not working. Look at them.
Do you know what? I really like WALL-E, and I like that whole take on the question, but I don't think people give up on personal growth, challenge, those kinds of things. I don't know. I was having this conversation with Nye actually the other day, and we were saying that the word work would probably evolve.
I can definitely see that happening. Right, it gets to the point where every job is taken over by whatever.
I don't think that would happen.
Really?
Yeah, I don't ever see a world where there's effectively no requirement for humans to keep on going. I think you can get probably, well, depends how you define close, but you can certainly automate a large portion of it.
Yeah, and I think this period will probably do something to increase that demand, that whole push towards automation, because in this kind of weird period with the coronavirus lockdown, I think the economy can trial a few things to do with automation. I don't know. I think it might...
Certainly highlighting some kind of weak points, I guess. Like for example, like home delivery is clearly not equipped to deal with this kind of event. The infrastructure is just not there, because if you have tried to do home delivery, you've probably found that you'd be waiting weeks and weeks and weeks for a slot and you might not get anything delivered at all.
Have you seen those robot things? They look like... Right. If anyone's actually listening to this podcast, which is unlikely.
At this point.
Can somebody tell me what I've seen? Right, it's an ongoing thing. If anyone can tell me what I've actually seen.
Is this in your dreams or like?
Are you okay, Connor?
You just need help.
I think I'm having a breakdown.
Are you on your meds?
It's this, you know, Star Wars, right? You know, the Death Star.
Yeah.
You know those little mouse droids.
Yeah.
They whiz around and
Are you talking about those things on like estates?
Yes.
That are delivering mail?
Yes. Oh, thank God. You know what it is.
Only because you ranted about it the last time I saw you.
Fuck. maybe the inception of this idea was just in my fucking addled brain. Maybe no one externally told me about this. But they're like the little mouse droids from Star Wars. And it's the one that Chewie roars at. And it rolls away like a little truck, and basically there's a real life version of it, and it's massive. You can't pick it up because it's so heavy. It's got all these alarms and shit, and they deliver mail to people. It's like an automated delivery service, but it's only in certain isolated areas. I don't know whether it was like on a campus or...
I'm seeing something about in Norway a robot will soon be delivering people's mail. And it looks like an expanded mouse droid or whatever they're called.
Yeah, you fucking know they're called mouse droids, mate.
I mean,
you go on Wikipedia.
I obviously want to hide how much of a Star Wars fan I am because it's so unpopular.
This weird thought experiment. Yeah, I don't know. I think people would approach things differently to how they do now. I think society would move into a space where certain things that aren't considered work now would be considered work because you're still putting physical effort into certain things. So social activities would be seen as the new work. There'd be pressures, there'd be challenges. So I think sports would kind of blow up. just in the same way that people volunteer now. People volunteer for the tiniest of things. People will volunteer to go and help out at a big sporting event just to be close to athletes. And that's a day of work potentially.
But I think if it ever got to the point where normal jobs were automated, there would be a market for human interaction.
Depends how good the AI is, but yeah, I think that's certainly true.
Like if you go to a pub,
yeah, I was just going to say,
you don't want to be served by a robot. Maybe there's some novelty in that, but I'm sure that at some point,
well, if it was the norm,
yeah, people will want human interaction.
Yeah, well, I would want human interaction from a barman, but in that world, I would happily volunteer behind the bar.
Instead of being paid.
I was just going to ask about how this is going to work. If you had a 100% automated economy, would that tie into some sort of universal income method where everyone is just given enough?
We'd all get ration tickets.
This is just a communist utopia that you're like.
This is literally World War One.
No, this is it's mental bollocks. It's ramblings of a madman, i.e. me. But
I appreciate. Yeah,
I'm just saying from the point of view of it wouldn't be boring, and obviously I think there are parallels with what's happening with the coronavirus now. I think some people are kind of realizing that challenge and meaning and strife doesn't necessarily have to come from work. I would much prefer social interaction. I'd much prefer to be able to go out. You know, I'm not in an ideal situation myself. Like, I do have family that have been massively affected by the pandemic, and I'm not able to go and visit them, which is shit. You know, I'm not fucking loving every minute of this. But what I am saying is that I'm not as bored as I thought I would be, and with a few tweaks, I could see myself living a similar life. And this is coming from somebody who really, really loves his job, and half the time, you know, my a day of work is really fulfilling, and it's actually the highlight of my day. But I am still finding that there's not a gap, so long as I actually make the effort and kind of strive towards certain projects and keep on the ball, and you know, maintain that regular kind of social interaction. Obviously, it's not ideal because we're doing it over Discord, but you know, in this fucking weird future utopia, dystopia, however you look at it, you know, I could probably do that. I don't think a life without work would be boring, but I think our view of work would change.
I don't think it would be anything more than a thought experiment.
Obviously, yeah.
Like, there'd have to be quite a significant shift in mentality for a lot of people to adjust to that kind of more relaxed life than a kind of, if you go from like quite a hectic office job to sort of having all that kind of energy, but you need to invest in particular projects to kind of keep busy, like you said, like that would take, I think, some quite large adjustments for most people.
And I think that's the redirection of effort that people are struggling with in this current lockdown.
Yeah,
I think people are really struggling to switch over and let their hobbies and relationships actually take the fore and actually be something that you need to invest time in. I think people are kind of thinking, well, what do I do? It's like, well, you're doing it. You just have to maybe be a bit more contemplative and introspective and really think about what you want from your relationship. This is the time now to think of, you know, what do I want out of life? You know, learn an instrument or something, or you know, I appreciate that. Obviously, this is particularly difficult on certain people. This isn't a holiday. This isn't a time to fucking ponder. This is fucking ground zero for a lot of people. But I think for possibly a large majority of people, there is opportunity there to actually experience something different.
It kind of reminds me of that horrible quote, the number one killer of old people is retirement. Have you heard that?
Yeah, and I've actually seen that working in several pubs. I've seen what retirement can do to a lot of old boys that have no direction left. It's not nice. That's because mainly they struggle to redirect their attention to another thing. Possibly they can't, and I don't think I could after doing one thing for so long. I don't know. I don't think I could. Should we talk about this whole wartime parallel thing that everybody seems to be? Everyone's a soldier now, apparently.
Yeah, go on then.
Well, I don't know why everyone thinks. Somebody said the other day this is the Somme.
That's just offensive.
Yeah,
That's
right.
literally offensive.
It's offensive. I think it was Pitts that was telling me about it. I think it was somebody in the military.
What?
And I think they were in charge of the advising civilians making these Nightingale hospitals. And they drew a direct parallel to the Somme. And I was just thinking, that's got to be offensive. But no one's alive to take offense at it. To say that because you're a bit bored, and I appreciate obviously that. So if you're in actual poverty and the loss of the paycheck with the furlough thing, really affected you, that's a different story. If this has affected your lifestyle to the point where it's tipped you over the edge, if you're in social care or the NHS, or if you rely on social care or the NHS, yeah, sure. This I think it's comparable, but to the large majority of people, especially the media and stuff, they seem to be equating a bit of boredom and I can only go out once a day with looking up and seeing a fucking Messerschmitt's going to bomb your house during the Blitz. People in planes trying to actively kill you.
Well, the media will do that. They love to play up any situation, and this is probably the best thing that could have happened to them. I firmly believe that they're loving every second of this, at a company level, maybe not individual people.
No, I don't think so at all. I've been watching a bit of Holly and Phil, and I think they genuinely want to comfort people. I think they don't know how to handle, because it's such a broad range of experiences for different people. Like I said, I like to think I'm coping, even if that is a very pushed direct effort to remain so, and to not think about some of the negatives and to focus on the positives. But I get, other people aren't. And I think the BBC and stuff, I think they just kind of think, well, as a blanket rule, let's pretend this is the worst thing to ever happen.
Yeah. I mean, you're hearing about like children who have perfectly healthy children suddenly dying of coronavirus on the news. And that is going to happen, unfortunately. But if you look at the overall picture, the fact still remains that the most vulnerable people are going to be the old and the weak, as with almost any other disease you could name. But we're just getting reports of 5-year-old kids dying and 100-year-old grandpa miraculously surviving because they're the, quote, interesting, unquote, stories at the moment. So you're getting kind of both ends of the spectrum, or the bell curve, whatever you want to call it. But like the meat of the matter, where the statistics actually tell you the truth, is kind of glossed over. And that's probably my biggest gripe. The fact is, a lot of people, through no fault of their own, don't have an excellent grasp of statistics. And that's absolutely taken advantage of. So, like, as an example, I think I heard somewhere that if you are on a ventilator with this COVID-19, your like chance of survival will drop to like 50%. And you could read into that ventilators are dangerous. So it just really does depend how you all interpret it.
Yeah, I think there's a responsibility more than ever with news authorities, mainly because it's been so indicative of how willing people are to let other narratives drive them. I don't really blame the news or the government or anything over this. I think I would, from my personal point of view, I think everyone's doing a relatively stalwart job. It's just Boris says jump and suddenly we're all soldiers fighting invisible Nazis, and the home front has appeared out of context back, and everyone's digging for Britain.
But I hear this rhetoric of war all the time, regardless of coronavirus or not.
Yeah.
Mostly from my mom going, "Oh, you'd never survive in the war." And I'm like, well, maybe I would. This is a completely different scenario.
Yeah.
A lot of criticism from the older generation direct to the younger generation is war related, strangely. Always like, oh, these young guns wouldn't,
Yeah, usually from people that
weren't ever in the war.
Or would, not even scarcely remember it. I don't know. It's do people want to be in a war? Is that it?
Yeah,
I think it is.
I think they do.
I think through the veneer of, let's not be too cynical, I think it's to do with like a loss of meaning. I think people want to feel that sense of purpose. On one hand, it's great that government can use evocative imagery and people respond accordingly. But in another way, it's fucking terrifying. People are so desperate for a place. I think it's fine to talk about the war if you're drawing a few sociological comparisons. It's interesting to see how social media has reacted, for instance. Like, I've always wondered how, in a Western country, social media would respond to a real crisis. Because obviously we grew up at the start of social media. It's really weird. Like, everyone's rediscovering chainmail.
Really?
Yeah. People getting those. I'm not on about like armor. I'm on about.
No.
Yeah, like, I think it was really popular in the 90s and the noughties. Like, everyone's just sending around chainmail. People are going nuts. But I've always wondered, like, what would people still be taking selfies during an apocalypse? And this is probably the closest parallel, touch wood, that we'll actually have of that. And it's just really bizarre and revealing of things. I think most people are doing quite well with it, but I still think, probably myself included, people feel a bit lost and don't know quite how to handle it on like communal. I think it's the lack of social contact, and people are having to move into a different space and talk over things like Discord or Facebook.
Yeah, it's the kind of sudden loss of freedom. Because like probably a month ago, there's no lockdown. I came and visited you, Connor, for example. Went to a really crowded pub. This is like a completely different world. And when all that gets taken away so fast, I think people are going to react quite differently. I think that's why you're getting a lot of people say, well, I'm still going to go out to the park. It's a nice day, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah. It's great that people react against that with a kind of sense of moral duty, conscientiousness.
Yeah.
But I think some people are taking it a bit too far. It's like this kind of herd mentality going on where, because obviously the media has been using words like enlist. You are now enlisted. We'll have to fight this invisible enemy. I think that's what's making people fucking crazy. People think they're in a war, and it's not like a war. We have to be more aware of, different things than you would be in a war. It's a different kind of existential threat. It's a threat to lifestyle as well, and I don't know if it's quite the right tactic. I actually really like the Queen's speech, where she was like, we'll see each other again. We'll be able to chat with our families again. I think that was probably a nicer, more hopeful message than, fucking Nats, stab the Nazi virus.
Have either of you read Jean Baudrillard?
I'm going to say I haven't, so that you can tell me all about it.
Well, relatively recent French philosopher. He's dead now. But his famous thing was that the Iraq War did not happen. That's like the bold statement. That's, obviously a war happened, but his argument was how we received the war isn't the war that happened. So he's talking about how, for the first time, it was more a war in the public imagination than the reality of the war, if you see what I mean. So because it's, I suppose, the first big war in America since 24-hour news, and the fact that everyone's like plugged into watching the news and receiving what they've been told, then his whole thing was how what we're told, collectively, we all imagine something that isn't the reality of war.
Similar to his idea of the simulacra. Exactly.
So the fact that like representation overtakes reality.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure he was the one who said that as a society, like a collective consciousness, we need the idea of war. We crave it because of its unifying features.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, really. Or at least some sense of conflict. Yeah.
Conflict us versus them type thing.
Mm.
We always need that.
Yeah.
When you were talking about how people are blowing out of proportion and how it's unifying and all this kind of thing, that's what just sparked it. I don't know what you think about that.
I'm not, I guess I'm not really saying that people are blowing it out of proportion. I do just want to make clear that I think everybody should obviously follow the government's advice, and everybody should do everything they can and take the matter very seriously. But also, I think I'm more interested in how it is affecting people in the home and affecting people's mentality, rather than these big, grand narratives. I guess when I'm being critical, I guess my criticism's more accurately aimed at people who are struggling needlessly with the idea of being in their own company and in the company of loved ones, and just really just missing work and a second jog.
Yeah.
Although obviously that is not everyone's experience.
I think if we carry on with this set of people, rather than the people who literally are, this is the worst sign for them. I think social media has a role to play in the fact that everyone's going crazy because it's just one big echo chamber, like one huge herd mentality type thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I didn't even know that we were doing claps until my parents walked out the front door and started clapping because I'm not tuned into it. I'm like, well, who told you to start clapping? Like, oh yeah, Facebook told us. I'm like, what?
Facebook told us, yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
I'm guessing you two are more cynical of the clapping than I am.
I think it's a good, it's a nice gesture. I honestly find it quite cringy.
I think it's a bit hollow.
Having done it, I know what you mean. I don't know. I think the clapping is very strange because it reveals the best and the worst of humanity. Like on one side, it's like virtue signaling. There's actually been shaming people who aren't.
Yeah. I look at 25; they're not coming out.
I heard stories about shaming people that aren't clapping, and they turn out that they're NHS workers and they're fucking tired.
And it's jokes, isn't it?
They don't.
It's just another thing to get your knickers in a twist on.
And especially, as you said, like social media can be this massive domino for this kind of thing, and it can really fucking wreck someone's career. Oh, this cunt wasn't clapping. Oh, this cunt hates the NHS. That's the part that I want to be critical of in this podcast, and that's the only thing I want to be critical of. People not being open to different ways of thinking and different experience. That's my only real criticism of what's happening. And I think it's been interesting how this is shown.
It's like seeing those things on Facebook. It's like, share if you want your mum to live tonight. It's the same principle, right? There's no real difference apart from maybe a bit of superstition, but I
think it has been uplifting for a lot of people. It's a sense of community. It's a physical manifestation of collective support, right? It's just an expression. It's like waving or whatever. Maybe we'll get more used to it. I don't think it's going to really run on long enough for it to be like a cultural institution. It's fine just if you view it in its context as an optional kind of supplement to volunteering or staying at home or actually doing something really useful. You know, or like consuming things responsibly, like not buying a toilet roll. These are the things that really matter. This is a supplement to it. But for a lot of people who probably just aren't, I don't want to say aren't thinking straight, but shaming people for not clapping because they're tired from actually volunteering, that is not thinking straight.
Yeah. But I think shaming people for not clapping because they don't want to clap anyway is a problem.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with not clap. Like, what is clapping actually doing?
Well, I wanted to tie in with something, this whole culture of informing, which is getting very fucking dubious.
Yeah.
You know, it's weird. No one's really talking about this, but I think being critical in this way actually helps society cope. And I think if we just had a bit more room to discuss things reasonably, I haven't really seen any philosophy really on the subject, other than a bit of like modern stoicism. But I don't think people are having real like polite, reasonable dialogue about coronavirus. I think it's been compliance or dissent, and I think there's a space in the middle where we can actually navigate, and even if it helps us comply, just read between the lines and think, well, okay, so what are the best behaviors and what's the best way to interact with somebody if you've seen them go for a second walk? It's like just hold the phone and so this whole culture of informing, I think to a certain extent we should all be irritated when somebody has a house party or something, or like a mass gathering. These are obviously wrong things to do, but dobbing somebody in for like their second walk just feels overly sinister.
Yeah, I agree. I guess it's just where do you draw that line? I mean, people shouldn't be going for second walks. As long as you're adhering to social distancing, etc., it's probably fine. But, in terms of actually enforcement...
Well, that's the thing to think about. That's why the blanket rule exists. That's why the lockdown has happened, because social distancing advice, it wasn't advice. I wish they'd stop calling it advice.
Well, instruction.
It was never advice. Yeah, it was instruction. But people keep calling it government advice. It's not advice.
It's also funny how many people. So on the Monday, I think it was the Monday where Boris said, "Okay, like you can't go outside except for these reasons now." People were like, "Well, he hasn't actually said the word lockdown."
Yeah.
So it's not. I was like, "What the fuck do you think this is? We can't go outside."
There's a lot of like on the news. There are always people asking questions like, "Well, what about this scenario? Or what about this scenario?" And it's a blanket rule. Like you're trying to worm their way out of it.
Yeah. I mean, in one sense, so long as you're doing social distancing, it doesn't really matter. But it's about this collective willingness to forego freedom. We adhere to these blanket rules because of a kind of harm principle, and to be honest, it's the only mandate that really counts when it comes to a government enforcing these rules. This is the only reasonable excuse you can ever have for limiting freedom, for when it harms other people. So this is just a massive extension of that. I find that quite interesting.
I think it's certainly I would hope it would make people more appreciative when we return to some semblance of normality. I mean, there's the things that we take for granted, like the fact that at the weekend I can go get on the train, go and see, like you, for example, Connor, or go out to London and do something, in a crowded pub or elsewhere. It's like, that's just unthinkable at the moment. And it's weird to think that a month or so ago, that was just the norm.
Yeah.
I think once you get out and people are able to do that again, it's going to be quite odd, but I would hope, at least for a short time, because people's memories tend to be quite short with this sort of thing, that we just look at what we actually take for granted every day. Because it's not like, it kind of sucks. Nobody likes the situation. But for most of us, for those of us who don't have a job at the moment, like they're still getting the 80% furlough.
Yeah.
Which honestly, that's costing the government a tremendous amount of money, or will be when it comes through.
Yeah. No, I think for many people, this situation, it's not something to lose your mind over. In fact, this could potentially be a somewhat useful time for not just individual thinking, but for the whole of society.
Yeah.
I think maybe certain changes will happen because of this period. Appreciate going out, but also appreciate that, oh shit, well, I don't need to spend my entire life in Costa. I've got tea bags at home.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think this is going to have an impact on business and stuff. That the kind of stoic sentiment I've been trying to espouse is like, I think we also have to bear that in mind when it comes to this imagined day of liberation, when all the bunting's going to be fucking hung in the streets and people are going to be having tea parties like it's the Queen's coronation
and clapping constantly.
Yeah, but it's not going to happen.
No.
It's not going to be like that. It's actually going to be, you have to prepare for the reality that it will be a very slow and gradual process.
Yeah.
And this will kill a lot of local business. Let's not, we have to be prepared to support certain businesses. Pick a business and spend whatever money you have left after this on that business, because you're gonna need to if you want to see it again. The last recession and austerity and things have been kind of lingering in the background anyway, and I don't think a lot of high streets are going to recover from this.
No,
there will be drinking, there'll be eating. People are going to obviously celebrate, and there's going to be a sense of relief. And I hope that people appreciate simple things more. I've actually been doing housework and gardening and shit. Hopefully I'll keep on top of it after lockdown. I fucking won't, but it would be nice if somebody did. But lots of services just won't come back. We're a tertiary industry anyway. I think some luxuries are doing well through it. Toilet paper, it's not a luxury, but like video games, people are.
Yeah,
I think that those kind of industries are still going to ride through it. I think a lot of things like microbreweries and comedy clubs and things. I think it may also be a good thing, because I think I've talked about the local before, how I think it's a mixed bag of the local pub, how I think that in one sense, if lots of pubs are dying, there's probably reasons why they're dying. I think it's a twofold problem. I think people need to start going to the pub more as well, or not associating the pub with a kind of stigma. Hopefully it'll weed out some bad restaurants and things. I don't know, but I'm just trying to think positively.
Yeah.
Joe, how do you think it'll affect the the economy in a broad sense?
Ooh, it's $1 million question. If I knew that, I'd be extremely rich. I mean, it's already started to affect the economy extremely badly. So it depends how much news you've been looking at. But summarized, stock markets have had some of the biggest crashes since 2008, and actually since before 2008, of pretty astronomical sizes, where people have just, investors have indiscriminately just basically tried to convert everything they have into cash. Because cash is typically quite a safe thing to hold in times like these. So we've seen that happen. We've seen, as a result of the kind of all of the businesses having to shut down, pretty much everything's ground to a halt really fast, which we haven't really seen before in recent times. And basically, to encourage spending, the Bank of England have dropped interest rates to historic lows. So they're the lowest rates that they've ever been in the Bank of England's history, which is causing knock-on effects in the housing market, for example. So you probably, if you were looking to buy a house about now, probably tough luck. Most places aren't continuing with housing transactions at the moment. If you're looking to get a mortgage soon, again, kind of tough luck, because the risk is so high. A lot of lenders are now asking for huge deposits to try and mitigate some of that risk. And again, it's just like the practicalities as well. Like if you wanted to go and buy a house or move somewhere, you've got to have contact with estate agents, physical contact that you can't really avoid. And that's just not happening at the moment.
Yeah.
So, but everything, pretty much all businesses have ground to a halt, and the government is spending astronomical amounts of money to get everyone back on their feet. So I mentioned earlier the 80% kind of wage recovery. There's going to be interest-free loans to small businesses, which will be in the hundreds of billions. So in terms of recovery, I think we're looking at a decade plus, probably, to get back to sort of somewhere where we were before in terms of everything. It's going to be a slow grind. I've certainly never experienced something like this. I think 2008 was the last comparable event, albeit quite different. But that's the kind of level we're talking about. This some serious shit.
Yeah, my mate's an estate agent, and he's got a backlog of things that he just can't do at the moment. And I think even when he is able to do them, it's going to be very slow going. I don't know if you guys have ever taken a particularly long holiday and gone straight back into work. You just feel groggy. You're not as good as you were. It takes some time to get back into it. I think the whole country is going to kind of be like that. You know, there's going to be where people are able to pay and go out on the lash and things, go to restaurants and start, using those services they weren't using before. I think they're going to find that those services are massively stretched as well. If only for like teething problems of people getting into the swing of things again, but also because there's going to be increased demand all at once. Fucking hell, when the tips open again, they're going to have at least 10 bags of rubbish from me in the garden.
There's a very real risk that because the government, as I said, is going to have to spend all this money, and they're not really going to be getting much tax, because it's only really the people that are still working, right, that they're able to tax at this point, because they're kind of paying everyone else's income. So we're going to be in a massive deficit. We're going to struggle to get out of. Interest rates are almost zero, and people still don't want to spend. What a few places have started doing in Europe, have started going to negative interest rates, which means that effectively you borrow more than you pay back. And if you're saving money, you don't get paid interest on it. You get charged for holding it at the bank, which is going to be really, really weird, because I think savings rates have been going down for years, but people are kind of don't seem to be too bothered about it. But I think if a bank started charging you for keeping your money in there, you probably think twice about where you're putting your cash. I think that's going to be a massive shake-up, and it's never happened before in the UK. And it wasn't looking likely until a month or two ago. But all the signs are now pointing to that as a very real possibility. It's going to be some really interesting, morbidly interesting times in the economy coming up. Food for thought.
So I'm just eating a mint.
I'm quite surprised this hasn't happened sooner, to be honest. I was thinking about this. if you look back to where this kind of started in all the wet meat markets, like that's not a new phenomenon. That's been going on for quite some time. There's like 7 billion people on the planet. There's going to be a few who are into eating some weird shit and doing some weird shit. And like, it was a really chance thing that started this virus. But the fact this is the first time we've had something of the scale, I think it's almost, that's kind of weird that this hasn't happened sooner.
I think it's very strange how we aren't. Well, the only person that's talking about it is fucking Trump, and he's talking about it in
China
in completely the wrong way, with absolute no nuance or sensitivity. But I think it's interesting that we're not really talking about these meat markets and things.
No, and I hope it's because we've got bigger problems to face imminently. But I would hope that when this is maybe not over but dying down, we start to really look at, like, how could we have prevented this? How did it start?
Yeah, it's a systemic problem among certain farmers. Basically, a lot of farms were faced with bad economy. And one of the things they did to supplement the economy was to create myths around kind of herbal medicines and making certain foods delicacies and things, pretending that, eating a fucking pangolin's ass would give you a big cock or something. So
that's the quote of the podcast right there, man.
Or like tiger's tongue gives you big muscles or cures cancer. And there's an industry surrounding this, which a lot of farmers were actually forced into. It's kind of like this weird, having to diversify or starve situation. And a lot of people will pay for those kinds of things. This one came from a bat, didn't it?
Yeah, I think a bat or a pangolin, or
there was somebody who was playing Jenga with a bat, a pangolin, and a moose or something.
Sounds like the beginning of a joke.
I don't know if you guys ever saw the dog festival things they had in China.
Oh yeah,
they were like skinning. It was just horrible. Luckily, there was a crackdown on that kind of thing. But I think it's just a systemically persistent problem in certain regions. And I think from an animal rights perspective, at the very least, we need to start really opening up a certain conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I guess again, it's a question of where you draw the line between impinging on a cultural tradition and just saying, well, actually, that's insane. And I think for me personally, it's well above that line.
Well, yeah, I mean, regardless of what you think of culture, the dog does not have that culture. The dog is separate from cultural traditions. That there's a line underneath morality which deals with culture, which is ethics, which is underneath. It's the spine of morality, and that's the bit you share with the dog. You don't share the culture with the dog because the dog can't understand culture. So you don't it's not particularly difficult. You don't skin another animal when it's alive.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a first principle before you get into discussion of what is morally acceptable within a certain society or just cultural norms and things like that.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it.
It's like FGM or something. It's like, no, there's an ethical thing first before, we would happily do it with our own society. We could talk about, we don't have to go completely relativistic. Obviously, we should be sensitive to cultural issues, but we would happily say that our own society in the 16th century was particularly abhorrent.
Well, we don't even have to go that far.
Yeah.
Like fox hunting. That's just fucking mental.
And I think you do have to be more sensitive in the way you converse about it and the manner in which you're, really, you have to really think about, well, what is it I'm trying to change here, and how am I most likely to do that? You can't go barging into a dialogue and expect it to really work at all. You're just going to end up probably looking like a prat to them. But yeah, so it doesn't matter where FGM is being done. The point is, it's being done. So you open up the dialogue. Yeah, one thing I've been thinking is how this is very much a class problem. The way that it affects things like social distancing, masks, PPE are pretty much like a Western middle class privilege, and a lot of luxury and travel and stuff has essentially caused a lot of the spread. I think people are looking into a lot of like sport and events that were going on just on the run up and how they may have caused stuff. And it's obviously these are people that can afford to go and do that. Again, not necessarily pointing any fingers, but it's the poorest people that usually suffer from these kinds of things, you know. And I don't think that's necessarily a very Marxist thing to say either. I think that's from within the narrative of capitalism, from some sense. It's just,
are you saying suffer financially
and medically? Poorer communities are more on top of each other,
right? Yeah,
particularly poorer countries as well, and they are not going to be able to afford to do things like social distancing, or to afford things like masks, or to go for a walk in a place that isn't fucking crowded with people. But yeah, I think at the very least it's exposed a lot of problems with the way things are currently run. And again, it's not a lot of people are being like, oh, capitalism's to blame. It's like, well, no, you can still have fucking capitalism and a slightly fairer stratification of and measures in place to prevent something like this. Obviously, a lot of people have been saying they were basically one paycheck away from being evicted.
Yeah, it's really hard to say because individual circumstances. I agree. I don't think you can really blanketly blame everything on how the financial system's set up.
Well, one thing to keep in mind is that this is it's a natural disaster, and it's not like an economic crash. Obviously, it will result in an economic crash, but it's not, because a lot of people are saying, "Oh, the 2008 thing was a cyclical thing that people could have predicted," and that's to do with the very nature of capitalism. It's to do with its essence, but this is not. This is like a completely outside influence. So, you know, I think cut it some slack.
Yeah, it's you're absolutely right. It's a totally different. It's sort of fair to draw some comparison to 2008, but the reasons for the economic impacts are completely different. So as I said earlier, this is like I don't think we've really ever seen, certainly not outside of wartime, this kind of everything just stops within a couple of weeks. We're just not prepared. Obviously, we're just not prepared. I just look around, like we're not prepared for this sort of thing to happen.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting the things it's revealed about not just the way people are thinking and living, but also the economy itself. You know, the fact that people can work from home, the fact that automation. I mean, we ended homelessness in a lot of major cities overnight because apparently the need was great enough, but it wasn't before.
What's that?
Well, homelessness is now not really a thing.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So that could be done, apparently. It's like, so why didn't you do that before? Oh, I didn't have enough money. What, and you do now? Yeah, obviously it's not going to be without massive ramifications, but I don't know. It's just been interesting seeing things like that happen, and it's exposed some of the faults that we have with things like relative poverty. But I think it's also shown to some degree a lot of good infrastructure that's been in place to help people, a lot of quick thinking. At the very least, there are lots of things we can learn from.
Yeah, and I hope we do.
Yeah. Anybody got anything else to say, or is that a good note to end it on?
It's positive. It's better than doom and gloom.
It's positive. It's about one of the only positive things we've had to say, so it's probably a good shout.
Well, if you can, do good things in your own house. Cheers.
All right, Churchill.
I just lost words. Yeah. Don't slob around, but don't feel guilty. Find some middle ground and maybe get a few things done, but try and enjoy something, even if it's just this podcast.
Thanks for listening, you two.
Right.
Just heavily depressing, really, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's not great.
China.